All right, guys, welcome to the Tim Moen Show. I'm your host, Tim Moen. As most of you know, I am the former leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada. In 2015, I ran for Prime Minister, essentially, with the now popular slogan, I want gay married couples to be able to protect their marijuana plants with guns. Didn't get the job. Some other dude named Justin got the job. And, so here I am back at work. It's a firefighter, paramedic, and paying the bills. I cashed in my retirement savings at the time. How many times do you get a chance to run for Prime Minister? So I figured, let's leave it all on the deck in this life. Let's leave it all on the mat and put my money and my energy where my values lie and see if I can't move the ball down the field a little bit towards liberty for my kids and my grandkids eventually. So that's what that's a little bit about my background. So I was a leader of this party. During my leadership, I led the party to its most successful year in its 40-some year history, which isn't really saying much. I mean, libertarians are pretty small, fringe minority, and we don't get a lot. But I was pretty proud of the success that we made. And one of the things that happened, and this is just a little backstory, to give you a backstory between my history with Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada. So after 2015, Stephen Harper stepped down as the CPC leader, and Justin Trudeau had won, so Harper stepped back, and that started a leadership race. And me and a lot of my compatriots from the election really liked a lot of things that Maxime Bernier was saying in terms of economic freedom, economic liberty on that stage. He struck us as a sort of closet libertarian, if you will, right? He was in the Conservative Party, and we know that in the Conservative Party there are closeted libertarians. There are people that are libertarians, but that they hold their libertarianism close to their chest because they don't want to, they don't want to be outed and then lose their position and their power and their prestige and their stature. And fair enough. I'm happy those people exist. I'd much rather have a closet libertarian, in the Conservative Party than a closet socialist or communist or something like that. Anyways, Maxime Bernier seemed like he might be one of these closet libertarians because of some of the things he said. He talked about Austrian economics, right, which is the preferred economic school and theory of libertarians, whose the godfather of which is Ludwig von Mises, and then you have Friedrich Hayek in that group, and you have Rothbard and numerous others. He continually talked about that. So we're like, okay, this guy would be great. What we need instead of a centrist kind of left-leaning leader of the Conservative Party is someone who is libertarian-ish on that stage. Because if there's a libertarian up there leading the Conservative Party that is even half-assed libertarian, just like pays lip service to libertarian, at least, then we start looking less and less like radical extremists, right? And what we notice is that on the political debate stage, or in the political debate arena, okay, just in general, you have extremists on the left, very hardcore extremists. So you've got hardcore Green Party people or green ideology people. You've got communists. You've got socialists. You've got all these academics that are left-leaning, that are radical, and they're unapologetically radical, right? And they actually paved the way to talk about all these things. They talk about universal basic income, talk about carbon tax, and all these things that a few years ago wouldn't have been popular ideas at all and wouldn't have made it to the mainstream because they were seen as so fringe and so radical and so nutty, quite frankly, right? But it's these extremists on the left that are pulling everything. So it's not the Justin Trudeaus or really the Jagmeet Singhs that are pulling people left. It's these fringe radicals that are pulling things incrementally further and further left. They're chopping. They're moving that Overton window, that the window of allowable political discourse, further and further left. And what we notice is that there's no one doing it on the other side. There's no one pushing that window towards freedom. Conservatives, conservative-minded people, are not radicals by definition, right? They want things status quo. This is why, Michael Malice has coined the term conservatism is just progressivism driving the speed limit. They have no push towards, at the very best, they want to make America great again, right? Okay, we want to push things back a few years to when we were sentimental about America, or they would, if you want to know what a conservative's policies are today, just look at what a liberal's policies were 10 or 20 years ago, and because it's just lagging behind a little bit. And there was a pastor in the 80s that, this is nothing new. This is just personality types, sociobiology, really. If you're a conservative person, if you don't want to disrupt things, if you think we shouldn't just abandon and throw away our institutions on a whim, well, that impulse means that you're going to support whatever the status quo is, and you might be a little upset with how things are changing, and so you might want to go back about 10 years or 20 years, maybe a few more years, but you're basically just pushing back against the left a little bit. But eventually the left can, because of the radicals, continue to pull left, and there's no radicals on the right. There's no one trying to pull towards liberty. The only radicals you have that might be considered right are libertarians, right? We say, we're radical in terms of free market and individual liberty. And so the idea is you get a libertarian in an establishment party who is hamstrung, who can't really say the radical things that libertarians would like him to say, but can stand up there and say things like, we want a 15% flat tax. Now that sounds radical now, but that's only because you don't have a libertarian on that debate stage to the right of you saying we want 0% tax. Taxation is theft. We need to abolish it. When you have a libertarian saying that, this guy, then the Maxime Bernier 15% flat tax sounds perfectly reasonable. Without me on that stage, it sounds like a radical, crazy idea. And so this was our idea, to pull the Overton window more towards liberty, was get a radical like voices like me a bigger platform by having liberty-friendly people in the mainstream conservative party, just like Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau and all these guys. They have their radical friends that they're associated with that they might not explicitly endorse, but they at least keep them in the sphere of influence, right? They keep their they use them. At least they use them. They're like, okay, we want to go more leftwards, but we can't say what this radical over here is saying, but we'll let this radical speak. We'll give them a megaphone. We'll amplify their message. We'll do everything. And then when we come out with 50% of what that radical says, we'll seem like moderates. We'll seem like centrists, that sort of thing. All right. So to that end, we're like, okay, let's get Maxime Bernier elected. Let's get him into, let's having him leader of the CPC. We weren't sure if he was going to throw his name in or not, and we really wanted to encourage him. And we thought one of the things that might be holding him back or might be giving him pause to run in the CPC was Western support, right? He's got a heavy French accent and he's from Quebec. And, quite often, at least the perception is that Western Canadians aren't very friendly to Quebecers, and that, another French politician or Quebec politician would not be welcome. And there's certainly some of that in Western Canada, but by and large, Western Canada just wants someone who leaves us alone. And I knew Bernier was probably that guy. And I wanted to show Bernier that he would have support out in Western Canada. So we invited him out west, out to Calgary, my team and I. We set up an itinerary, wanted to connect him with groups and supporters and fundraisers and donors and different things like that. That we wanted to show Max that he would have Western support if he threw his name in the leadership race, and we wanted to encourage him to do it. So we had this, we started this Facebook page called Draft Bernier, and we wanted to start a little movement of like, let's get Bernier in this race. And to our delight, a few weeks after his trip out west to visit us, he threw his name in the leadership race. And so mission accomplished. We have Bernier in there, and he lost the leadership vote by, 0.5% or 1% or something like that. It was just a real close call. And I wonder what things would have been like had he got in there and had, he had your boy here standing beside him on the debate stage, making him look like a bloody moderate with my extremist rhetoric on the political stage. All right, so Bernier didn't win, and immediately I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity to draft Bernier into the Libertarian Party. And I actually sent out a video. I produced a video and put it out publicly as well. I called him, talked to him, and offered again to have him take my spot as leader of the Libertarian Party. I said, I will step aside. I publicly said this, step aside to have you as leader of the party. But I just wanted to once again extend my invitation to you. The Libertarian Party is where you belong. I'm so serious about this that I'm offering to step aside as leader if you join the party, call an immediate convention, and nominate you for leadership of the Libertarian Party of Canada. Now, my understanding is that from people close to him that I know, that Max watched that video probably a dozen times, and it weighed heavily on his mind. And over the next year, Max and I had conversations, and I always put that invitation out there and let him know. And he was very polite to me and always said, I appreciate Tim, but no, I'm going to try and change things in Conservative Party. I think maybe they listen and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, you keep believing that if you want, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're more interested in winning elections rather than trying to advance principle or something like that. So, and then the nail in the coffin was, Maxime was supposed to debate me at our party's convention. Trying to remember what year it was now, but the debate was that the question at hand was that liberty is best advanced through the Conservative Party rather than the Libertarian Party. And Bernier called me up at the last minute and said, "Hey, team, I cannot, in good conscience, engage in this debate with you. It is, I just don't believe it anymore," is what he said. He can't in good faith argue for the Conservative Party is a better avenue than the Libertarian Party. So I'm like, dude, it sounds like you're ready to leave that party. Like, come on over to the Libertarians and do this and that. Well, over the summer, I could tell he was really looking at jumping ship from the Conservative Party. I actually had a conversation with him once, and he told me that he's thinking about starting his own party, which kind of blew my mind. I'm like, dude, you've got a party right here. Like, I just didn't understand it. Why would you start your own party? We've already got a Libertarian Party. We don't need another one. Like, you don't need to start a new Libertarian Party. Dude, you can take over the Libertarian Party. I'll hand it over to you. Run it however you want. I mean, you just got to be true to liberty. That's all. Like, we have a very clear constitution and bylaws. Like, you're going to have to be true to liberty. But that's it. I mean, I believe you're a libertarian. Like, what's the problem? And, he talked about how I think, he threw a couple names at me. I don't want to tell you, what, but at the time, what it looked like to me was he was interested maybe in creating another conservative party, similar to the Reform Party, from the 90s that would take a chunk out of, the Conservative Party, base and basically reform the conservative movement in Canada to something following more conservative principles. And unfortunately, he came out with a party that's name was weird, the People's Party, which is I'll talk about that in a bit. I'm not a big fan of the name, But, I called him, congratulated him. And, I would have preferred to see him. If you remember, when Maxime Bernier left the Conservative Party, or he did so by basically forcing the Conservative Party to deal with him, right? And he did that by sending out a bunch of tweets about pushing back against, I think it was multiculturalism or immigration or something like that. Whatever. That stuff is boring to me and dumb, but I get why some people are upset by it. Populists certainly were, took our jobs or whatever. I would have preferred him flame out of the Conservative Party by saying, hey, taxation is extortion. It's theft. It's violent. It ought to end. Like all the drugs ought to be illegal. This is bullshit. That, the government is a criminal cartel imposing its will on us. And those kind of tweets would have got him kicked out of the Conservative Party as well. But it would have actually advanced a message that was important, that meant something, that challenged the root of all this. And that root, of course, is the state and statism, this belief in our population and in our politicians that we can use violence and have a criminal gang, a literal criminal gang that our society is organized around, that it's ordered by. So he didn't do that. He went the populist route and started the People's Party. And then even after he started the People's Party, he started running into some fundraising issues. Until he had actually run in a by-election, he couldn't issue tax credits or tax receipts. And so that really hampered his fundraising drive. And so a third party, a mutual friend of ours, noted this and said, hey, why don't you guys merge? And yeah, so we talked about a merge for a little while. And, again, all along the way here, at no point did he ever tell me explicitly that he was a libertarian, right? I was doing what everyone else around Max did, which is project my own political philosophy onto him and just imagine that he's that. And he would never deny it, but he would also never embrace it. And so, my hope and my desire overrid my rational faculties and what he was actually telling me by all his actions. What were his actions? Not joining the Libertarian Party, becoming leader and taking my place. Starting his own party instead of coming, when he did leave the Conservative Party, instead of just leading the Libertarian Party. When we started talking about a merge, he didn't want to adopt the Libertarian Party name. He wanted to keep the People's Party. The first thing he was very interested in was, well, how is your party incorporated? And I have no idea what he's talking about. Incorporated? How? Like it's an entity registered with Elections Canada. Well, it turns out that a lot of these political parties have fundraising arms that are incorporated. And he wanted to know, was it incorporated as a nonprofit, as a profit, as a charity? Like, how was it incorporated? Where was it incorporated? What were the articles of incorporation? Who were the corporate owners or shareholders of the company? Those questions were very, at the time, I thought it was kind of weird. Like, to me, I just wanted to talk about policy. I wanted to talk about what is our party going to stand for? What are the principles? He wanted to talk about how it was structured and who owns it and that sort of thing. Turns out Libertarian Party of Canada isn't owned by anyone. It's literally a party of the people. We have bylaws, but we're not incorporated as maybe we should be. Maybe, of course, the People's Party is, owned by three people. It's incorporated. There's articles of incorporation. You can look this up. You've got Maxime Bernier, his right-hand man, Martin Mass, and I think his lawyer or something like that. So, People's Party ever goes tits up or, the membership demand a proper leadership race, or they demand a policy convention and Bernier doesn't want to do it, well, he can take the People's Party of Canada and all the donations and the funds and leave. Like he owns it. So, maybe that's a smart move. Maybe, it's funny because I'm not a big fan of the people, because it makes it very difficult. Like it's kind of like collective ownership of something doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so in that way, Maxime Bernier is doing it right. I mean, he's the king of that party. He owns it literally. He can do whatever the hell he wants, to hell with what the people say. But on the other hand, he's claiming to be a party of the people. So, it's, anyways. Okay. So there's a bit of the backstory. The deal fell through because I don't know why. I assumed it was because we weren't incorporated and then he couldn't take ownership of the party or something. But he eventually just ghosted me, which kind of pissed me off. It made me quite bitter. He had told, one of his aides that was a friend of mine, that he had got what he needed from the Libertarian Party, and what did he have? All our members were jumping ship to the PPC now. And so he got our vice president, he got our director of communications, he got all these things. He basically decimated the Libertarian Party and got what he wanted. So I don't know, kudos to him, I guess. It seemed like a Machiavellian move. Maybe there's a more innocent explanation. Maybe the simple explanation is that he's just not a libertarian, and therefore he didn't want a merge that would have forced him to abide by liberty completely, libertarian principles completely, because that would have been inconvenient for him, as we'll see shortly here. So, okay, let's get into what the differences are in the People's Party and the Libertarian Party, and why I will always support the Libertarian Party as my party. Okay, so the first thing is, here's a clip of what Max said on Dave Rubin's show about the difference between the Libertarian Party, or the Libertarians, and him.
But I'm not a real libertarian, because a real libertarian will ask for open borders or no more regulations or legislation on drugs. And so I don't believe in that. I think we must have a state that will have some regulation, basic regulations.
All right, so there we are. Max finally saying, I'm not a real libertarian. After all this time, and to my incredible embarrassment, turns out Max isn't a libertarian, and I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed I invited him to lead the party. I'm embarrassed that I considered a merge with him. I was told, by numerous libertarians and party members that, hey, he's not a libertarian. Like, what are you doing considering this? I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that he was a libertarian. He never denied it. He never, he seemed to go along with it. What an idiot I am. And the idea that I was going to merge our parties together and throw away the Libertarian Party, I've got no excuse. I apologize to libertarians everywhere and to Libertarian Party members. That was probably one of my biggest failures as a leader. And, it was driven in large part by my desire to want to exit politics, to exit leadership. And I wanted to hand the party over to someone who could take it to the next level. I felt like I had given it a good springboard, but a guy who had nothing but a giant government pension and time, like Maxime Bernier and stature, could have really taken this thing somewhere had he been a libertarian, but he's not. It's a goddamn statist, as evidenced by that clip. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, let's deal with the first part of his comment, the open borders thing. That's just a myth. Libertarians come down on both sides of the issue, okay? Our primary concern is private borders. We want the government the hell out of our homes and out of our lives and out of our bodies, okay? And, that's exactly the only thing the government ever does with regards to the individual is open up borders. It never protects our borders as individuals. It only rips them wide open, gets right in there, tells us we can't have baby walkers in our house. We can't have incandescent lights. We can't put this in our body or that in our body or sell this, or we need a license for that. It comes into our house every single goddamn day, takes our money in way of taxation, extortion, and it violates our borders constantly. That's what government is there for. This is the libertarian insight. Okay, that government is a criminal gang. Governments get formed through conquest and plunder, and that's how they maintain their power. If you or I did anything the government did, we would be arrested in prison probably for life. Taxation. If we taxed our neighbor, that's called armed robbery. We hand our neighbor a note saying, hey, pay us our taxes or there's going to be consequences. Well, what are the consequences? Oh, well, guys with guns are eventually going to come and take your shit. And if you defend yourself, we'll put you in the ground. Yeah, that's what our government does to us. I don't care that is the technical definition of a criminal cartel. Okay, this is the libertarian insight. This is the greatest single threat to humanity, to civilization, to the individual. And so it's precisely because it opens up borders and violates them constantly. And so to a libertarian, it is just mind-blowing to ask that same monster, that has let itself into our home, made itself the boss of us, conscripts our kids to go off to war, takes half the shit out of our house that is ours, tells us what we can and can't do on our own property, that thing that's got us bent over the kitchen table, ass raping us, that entity. I'm now going to turn around and ask, hey, can you please do something about that person moving from point A to point B 2,000 miles away over there on Roxham Road because they threaten my liberty? Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Okay, even if that guy way over there threatens your liberty somehow, you got a fucking monster on your back ass raping you. It's weak as fuck to ask that guy to do something about that. Now, look, guys, I'm sorry. I'm getting a little worked up here. I'm going to tell you something. I haven't had nicotine. I've kicked nicotine. It's been 4 or 5 days since I had it. A little bit on edge. Your boy's a little bit on edge. I get irritable, okay? So, okay, open borders, okay, fine. Like, you know what my policy was and this is the difference between whatever the people's is and a libertarian, okay? When I looked at immigration policy, my number one thing was, how can I get the government the fuck out of this? Because government is a criminal cartel. Criminal cartel is never going to do things for my benefit. It's only going to do things for its own benefit. So if it opens up the borders, it's going to do it for its benefit. If it closes the borders, it's going to do it for its benefit. See what I'm saying? The problem here is not communist borders, socialized borders that we call national borders. That's a communist goddamn construct. Okay. The problem here is we have public property. Well, get rid of public property. And then we have a bunch of private borders and then we'll respect them. But my policy was, okay, I get it. Immigration can be an issue. If our goal is to shrink government, then maybe it ought to be done in a particular order, right? Maybe if we have floods of migrants coming here for welfare dollars and to vote on more government spending, that's not going to be good. I get it. Okay. So here, but I still, at the same time, I just can't. It's beneath my dignity to ask the government to solve problems for me and to solve this problem. So here was my solution. You want to hear it? It was sponsorship only immigration. Okay. What does that mean? That means, hey, immigrants can come here by invite. You can feel free to invite them. You have to look after them you have to take on the responsibility of their integration into society, into their housing, shelter, food. And you also have to have some skin in the game in terms of vouching for them. In other words, if you take on some legal liability, if that person you invite here turns out to be a criminal, you're going to have some liability here. Okay. Now this is a market-based approach. It may result in far less immigration than Bernier's policy or far more, but to simply throw out an arbitrary number, 100,000, 250,000, which is it? We move from 250,000 to 100,000? Who determines that? Fucking government? Are you kidding me? As if they know what the right number is? Oh, we've reached 100,000 immigrants. Sorry, Tim, your son can't have that neurosurgeon immigrate to Canada to fix that problem because we've reached the arbitrary number. Fuck you. That's so fucking weak. It's pathetic. Okay, the next part of his thing is the gross part. It's like, we need government for regulating drugs. You know? What? Really? We need a criminal cartel to tell us what we can and can't put into our body, what state of mind I can be in, what mind-altering substance I can take. Huh? It's disgusting. Look, guys, I get it. I'm a paramedic firefighter, right? I treat people in downtown that are hooked on drugs, that are addicts, that are out there in an open drug scene doing disgusting things, ruining their lives. You know, and think about how disgusting and sick it is to have a bunch of drug addicts openly walking around in a city, and think about how terrible it is to be an addict who will suck a dick just to get high, right? Disgusting, deplorable, like degrading. No one wants to see it. But it pales in comparison to what Bernier is asking for here. Okay, that's how disgusting this is to a libertarian. As disgusting as this open drug scene is, the idea that we need government, that we need a group of individuals with guns to point those guns and threaten to shoot people and kill people for doing consenting adult things that isn't hurting anyone but themselves, is absolutely disgusting. It's sick. That's a bridge too far for a libertarian like me to go. I can't get behind that, that corrupt thing. Guys, you've got to understand here. A libertarian is a person who has come to the conclusion through careful study of philosophy, of principles, of history, that the root of all evil, or most evil in this world today, certainly of the state of entropy and destruction and chaos that we see, is the state, or more precisely statism. The belief that there ought to be a group of people with the right, not only the right, but the moral and ethical obligation to impose its will, to violate others in the most egregious way, by coming into their homes, by getting into their bodies, by, a most basic right, like being able to, put into our body whatever the hell we want. Well, because you don't like what I'm putting in there, because, you don't like, that is, and so it's this idea of statism, that the state needs to be involved in some way in solving a problem we don't like. That is the root of all evil. Okay. This is where we get Drag Queen Story Hour. This is where we get, gender dysphoria run amok. This is where we get all the woke stuff that conservatives hate, come from the very kernel that the conservatives plant. I remember in the 80s when it was all about the war on drugs and these ridiculous ads. This is your brain on drugs. This is the reefer madness campaigns, and Nancy Reagan going hard in the paint on drugs. At the same time, we saw censorship on TV and like puritanical views being imposed on us by social conservatives at the top, in government. And you couldn't say this on TV or do this. We had to restrict this. We couldn't let this smut get out. And we definitely have to watch out for rock and roll and these satanic Motley Crue music. And, definitely the NWA and their song, Fuck the Police. I mean, the government's got to do something about this. This is what we were told constantly in the 80s. It was the social conservatives back then, right? They were giving the state the tools with which to oppress them later on, weren't they? Because what they were saying is, we need guys with guns to impose a moral order here. And that's exactly what progressives are doing right now, aren't they? They're using the guys with guns to impose a moral order. This is why conservatives are progressives driving the speed limit. Okay? This is the root of all our problems. I can't stress it enough. So this is what libertarians understand very clearly. Government is evil. Okay. Now it may be some branches of libertarianism, it's a necessary evil. Okay. We need it to protect ourselves from other criminal gangs, right? We need MI13 running a protection racket in our neighborhood, because if they aren't running the protection racket, then a neighboring gang will come in here and it'll be even worse. We don't want those foreign gangs in here. Let's stick with the gang we know. Okay. That's the argument for having gangs called governments exert territorial dominance over us and run a protection racket on us. Okay. Maybe that's true, but at the very least, we need to think about limiting it. We need our main focus ought to be on not going to that gang for every ache and pain and thing that we see in society, whether it's drugs or, people starving or healthcare, or we don't use criminality. We don't use violence to solve problems, and we don't encourage it. We don't plant seeds of statism by begging the state to do something about drugs or people moving from point A to point B. It's weak. It's deranged. It's corrupt. It's sick. Okay. It's sick. It's warped. I mean, this is exactly, like I said, this is how we get a morally deranged society, is we plant the seeds of moral derangement called statism, and we watch them sprout and watch all the different fucking branches come out, all the derangement, all the disgusting, despicable things that plant from that seed of imposing morality by violence. It's a sick fucking thing. So there we go. So there's a big difference. Now there are other differences. Okay. I mean, look, we can go through different policies and just see the language here and where the seeds of statism are implanted in their thing. So, so for example, if you go through the PPC's policy, there's a section there on pipelines, and, Bernier says he'll use section 92 of the Constitution, whereby Parliament can declare any project to be for the general advantage of Canada. Okay, so section 92 of the Constitution, I'm not 100% sure on what it does. It either allows the government to expropriate private land to push through a pipeline that's in the good of Canada. Again, against libertarian, private property is sacrosanct in libertarian philosophy. There's two things. Libertarian philosophy is two things, okay? It's the non-aggression principle or the non-initiation of force principle. Don't initiate force against someone to impose your will on them, and coupled with property rights. And property rights are, ownership of your body, ownership of the things that you appropriate in nature that are unowned or trade for or contract for in nature. Okay. So it's like Lockean homesteading or Lockean property rights plus initiation of force. So it is definitely not libertarian to use a government fiat to expropriate private land to push through a pipeline. I'm a big pipeline booster. Okay. I've defended the oil sands and pipelines against scoundrels like Neil Young and Daryl Hannah and all these Hollywood people who want to use force to violate property rights of a pipeline of an oil company to put in a pipeline across property and land that they have freely negotiated with. But just like I'm protecting property rights of oil and gas there, I'm protecting property rights of landowners against some Section 92 of the Constitution and some government fiat that will allow them. Now, the other way to interpret it is, I think it just prevents a province. Section 92 prevents a province from stopping a pipeline from going across, or something like that. So, again, libertarians are widely in favor of decentralizing power, of pushing, like, Canada's too big. We need more countries, right? And so to have Canada impose its will on a smaller jurisdiction like Alberta or Saskatchewan or Quebec is poo-pooed in libertarian circles. It goes against our philosophy of decentralize, and it says essentially that, look, a bigger jurisdiction can infringe on a smaller jurisdiction. Well, you guys talk about globalists all the time. PPC is all against globalists. What is it? What is that? That's the same thing. All right. Okay. Here's another big thing. One of the reasons why I wanted to, when I invited Bernier to lead the Libertarian Party, my plan was to run against him, and not that I wanted to win against him or could have won against him. There's no way, but I wanted to hold his feet to the fire on his support for foreign policy. If you remember, he was, he had a foreign policy cabinet position or something like that. He was over in Afghanistan for a while. He was part of Stephen Harper's War Hawk cabinet, right? Stephen Harper was wanted to get Canada into Iraq. You remember? Thank God he failed at that. He got Canada into Afghanistan, right? He got Canada into Libya. We bombed Libya, ousted Muammar Gaddafi. And by the way, made it a giant slave market and left it so that the most violent extremists, Islamists, were running that place now. And by the way, that attack also inspired 2 terrorist attacks on Canadian soil, right? We had the shooting up of Parliament where Nathan Cirillo, soldier guard in the cenotaph, was killed. And we had, I believe there was 2 soldiers killed as well in a hit and run or by a vehicle by a terrorist in Quebec. Both these terrorists cited Canada's involvement in Libya or announcement of their involvement in Libya as the hair that broke the camel's back and inspired them to act violently against Canadians. So the foreign policy that not only killed hundreds of thousands of people, not only created slave markets in countries that weren't ours, not only spent and exploited Canadians' tax money and made us all complicit by dint of having our money used to fund these evil things. It also made Canadians less safe and inspired terrorist attacks on our own soil. That foreign policy, right? I don't remember ever hearing Maxime Bernier speak out against it while he was in Parliament. That's a pretty big fucking libertarian thing. We're against wars. We think that the military ought to protect our nation, not be engaged in nation building, peace building, overthrowing dictators, basically all sorts of fuckery in the name of the military industrial complex. We don't engage in that stuff. We speak out against it. You want to see what a libertarian looks like in the halls of power, speaking out against this stuff? Stand by here. Listen to Dr. Ron Paul.
I served 5 years in the military. I've had a little experience. I've spent a little bit of time over in the Pakistan, Afghanistan area, as well as in Iran. But I wouldn't wait for my generals. I'm the commander-in-chief. I make the decisions. I tell the generals what to do, and I'd bring them home as quickly as possible, and I'd get them out of Iraq as well, and I wouldn't start a war in Libya. I'd quit bombing Yemen, and I'd quit bombing Pakistan. I'd start taking care of people here at home because we could save hundreds of billions of dollars. Our national security is not enhanced by our presence over there. We have no purpose there. We should learn the lessons of history, and the longer we're there, the worse things are, and the more danger we're in as well, because our presence there is not making friends, let me tell you.
Madam Speaker, I have a few questions for my colleagues. What if our foreign policy of the past century is deeply flawed and has not served our national security interests? What if we wake up one day and realize that the terrorist threat is a predictable consequence of our meddling in the affairs of others and has nothing to do with us being free and prosperous? What if propping up repressive regimes in the Middle East endangers both the United States and Israel? What if occupying countries like Iraq and Afghanistan and bombing Pakistan is directly related to the hatred directed toward us? What if someday it dawns on us that losing over 5,000 American military personnel in the Middle East since 9/11 is not a fair trade-off for the loss of nearly 3,000 American citizens, no matter how many Iraqi, Pakistani, and Afghan people are killed or displaced? What if we finally decide that torture, even if called enhanced interrogation technique, is self-destructive and produces no useful information, and that contracting it out to a third world nation is just as evil? What if it is finally realized that war and military spending is always destructive to the economy? What if all wartime spending is paid for through the deceitful and evil process of inflating and borrowing? What if we finally see that wartime conditions always undermine personal liberty? What if conservatives who preach small government wake up and realize that our interventionist foreign policy provides the greatest incentive to expand the government? What if conservatives understood once again that their only logical position is to reject military intervention and managing an empire throughout the world? What if the American people woke up and understood that the official reasons for going to war are almost always based on lies and promoted by war propaganda in order to serve special interests? What if we as a nation came to realize that the quest for empire eventually destroys all great nations? What if Obama has no intention of leaving Iraq? What if a military draft is being planned for the wars that will spread if our foreign policy is not changed? What if the American people learn the truth, that our foreign policy has nothing to do with national security, that it never changes from one administration to the next? What if war and preparation for war is a racket serving the special interests? What if President Obama is completely wrong about Afghanistan and turns out worse than Iraq and Vietnam put together? What if Christianity actually teaches peace and not preventive wars of aggression? What if diplomacy is found to be superior to bombs and bribes in protecting America? What happens if my concerns are completely unfounded? Nothing. But what happens if my concerns are justified and ignored? Nothing good. And I yield back the balance of my time.
I wanted to give Max an opportunity to sound like the heroic Ron Paul by letting him run for the Libertarian Party and holding his feet to the fire. He could have said, I'm sorry I ever supported this. I'm sorry I never spoke out against it. I'm sorry for the piles and piles of bloody, broken bodies that I played a part in creating because of my support, or at least neutrality when it came to the military-industrial complex. When I had an opportunity to say something against it, I didn't. And I'm sorry. And I had a come to liberty moment, and there's nothing I can do to make up for what I did, but I can just tell you that I have learned from my mistakes. I will not do this again. I feel absolutely horrific. He could have said something like that. That would have been fantastic. He could have said something. He could have acknowledged his part in all this. But I got crickets. We got crickets. And instead, we got a foreign. Now, you know, the PPC policies change from time to time. I remember the first time I looked at the PPC's foreign policy, it was basically something to the effect of, we need to fight them over there. So rather than fight them over here, we shouldn't do all these wars, but we definitely need to fight them over there before they come over here. That's just more of the same bullshit conservative stuff that creates perpetual wars, that feeds the military industrial complex, that creates terrorism and feeds it. His foreign policy now is, continue to work closely with our allies to maintain a peaceful international order, but will not get involved in foreign conflicts unless we have a compelling strategic interest in doing so. Again, pretty wishy-washy there. Maintain a peaceful international order? What? Why should Canada care about an international order, a globalist order out there? Why should I care if Cambodia and Vietnam are fighting, or, Ukraine and Russia are going at it, or whatever? Why do I need to extort money from Canadians and send our brave young men and women overseas to impose some kind of peaceful international order? And what would a compelling strategic interest be for Canada in getting involved in conflicts? What possible strategic interest? So again, it's just not the kind of commitment, the anti-war commitment, that a libertarian likes to see. We want to see a foreign policy that says we're like Switzerland. Every adult has an assault rifle in their home and is trained to use it. And if you come and invade our country, by God, we will give you hell. But instead, we have a foreign policy that talks about peaceful international order and strategic interest. No. Here's another thing. Again, climate policy, right? It basically, if you read the climate policy, and I've read a couple of iterations of it, but it's basically the same thing. Look, there is no climate emergency, therefore we don't need government intervention, right? Again, that's a weak argument from Liberty. That is saying that if there was a climate emergency, we obviously would need government intervention. We concede the point that government is needed in an emergency. No. The right answer is government is definitely not needed in an emergency. In fact, the greater the emergency, the less we probably need government, right? And it's similar to the COVID-19 stuff, right? I remember in the early days of the pandemic when we didn't know how bad it was, no one except libertarians seemed to be against the 2-week lockdown, right? Everyone was like, well, I guess it kind of makes sense. I mean, we'll need government if this pandemic's as bad as everything says. If in 2 weeks, it's not big a sacrifice. We were against it. We were against it from the start. And, the arguments, that I hear constantly from populists against all these lockdown measures and horrendous government invasions, again, into our borders, ripping our borders open and telling us we got to stay locked in our homes, keeping us there. We've got to wear masks. We got to get vaxxed, all this stuff. The arguments are, well, the vax doesn't work. The masks don't work. The lockdowns didn't work. It was all a hoax. It all came out of a Wuhan lab. Whatever they are, like, these vaccines are killing people. Therefore, government intervention was bad. No. Government intervention was bad, even if every single thing the establishment media said was 100% true. Even if the virus was as deadly as they said, even if it was 10 times deadlier, even if the vaccine was 100% effective, even if the masks worked, even if lockdowns stopped the spread, even if all that stuff worked, it's still evil and immoral to do all those things. And so stop hacking at the branches of statism, of authoritarianism, and of tyranny. You're cutting off a branch and two more are popping up. Strike the root. What is the root? Libertarians say the root is statism. It's the idea that the state ought to initiate force and impose its will on people. And if you don't understand the arguments against that, you're not equipped to advance liberty. I'm sorry. All you're doing is advancing a different tyranny. All you're doing is having progressivism and wokeism advance at a slower pace, but you're never reversing it and you're never doing anything about it. You can't continually plant seeds of statism and expect the state to shrink. On the Libertarian Party, again, that is the primary focus of the party. Look, I'm not the leader anymore, but I know it has very strict constitution, bylaws. It's got a party structure, and it can't change what it stands for. It's right there in the Constitution. It's very difficult to change it. Okay, I don't know what the PPC stands for. I hear, fairness, liberty, freedom. What do those things mean? I don't know what they mean. I don't know what you mean by liberty. Obviously, you don't mean the same thing I do if you want to lock people up for doing drugs or for selling them. Obviously, you don't mean the same thing as I do if you're begging the government to stop people from moving from point A to point B. Okay, man, I need some nicotine, guys. This is too much for me. This is too much. All right. Well, I hope that gives you some idea of the difference. Look, again, the root of the issues here is the state. The state. The primary focus of any liberty lover ought to be restricting the state, not asking it to do things like stop migrants. Okay. Migrants could be a problem. Okay. But look, I'm over in Alberta. We got some shady people moving from point A to point B over there at Roxham Road in Quebec. How the fuck does that have anything to do with me? Well, I'll tell you how it has to do with me. The government makes me associate with those people. My tax dollars are going over there to deal with that stuff. My tax dollars are going to be needed to fight crime, to give them health care, to provide social supports for them. Right? That's the problem. I'm connected to them in this democracy. And whatever their opinion becomes as Canadian citizens is going to affect me. So yeah, I get it. I get why migrants is a problem. But guess what? The person moving from point A to point B isn't the problem. The problem is the forced association. The problem is the taxation. The problem is the goddamn government here. And yet you're asking the same people that are causing the problem, that are on your ass raping you. You're turning around, giving them a look back, an angry dragon saying, hey, can you take a break from ass raping me to deal with that person moving from point A to point B? Because I think they're going to make your rape even worse next time. It's just weak. It's just, I can't wrap my head around it. Okay. I get it. I honestly, I get what the concern is, but listen, you're focused on all the wrong things. Another thing is there's a bunch of things, this focus on globalism as the main issue that's confronting Canada. Klaus Schwab. Yeah. All those guys are immoral, power-mongering, megalomaniac bastards. Yeah. I don't want to be run by them. But guess what? How can we say I'm run by them when it's the Trudeau government, when it's my own local government, when it's the provincial government that are pointing the guns at me? Okay, 15-minute cities. Let's say Edmonton decides it's going to confine people into their cities. Was that Klaus Schwab that did it? Klaus Schwab may have come up with the idea. Sure. But it's the Edmonton, it's the state that is doing it. It's our own state. It's our own gang that's doing that. Maybe they're getting some brilliant ideas from other gangs, but that gang isn't pointing a gun at the mayor of Edmonton or the council of Edmonton saying, you will impose this. No, they might be bribing them a little bit or offering them some prestige or doing this, but it's ultimately our own state, our own officials that are imposing their will on us. So I get it. It's sexy to uncover all these mastermind plots and these puppet masters out there controlling strings. Nah, at the end of the day, you know what it is? It's our neighbors. Our neighbors want free shit. Our neighbors want, less carbon dioxide. It's the people. It's the people. The people are the problem. The people want this stuff. The governments are meeting a market demand, a political market demand here. which brings me to the next point. The people, the People's Party, this fetishization of the people, as if that's a thing, as if the government could ever represent something called the people, as if we would want it to represent something called the people. I mean, the people in Canada, 60%, 65% are to the left of center. Is that who you want controlling your life? Is that who should have a say in how your life goes? And how much money you can take home, and what kind of property you can own, and what you can do with it, and what kind of commercial activity you can engage in? No, I want to be protected from the goddamn people. I can't have a government because they might do what the people want. So this idea, it's kind of a populist delusion of this fetishization of the people. All right, I'm running out of steam. I got to go find some caffeine. Listen. Guys, I want to make this clear. I love people in the PP. I love a lot of the people in the PPC. Okay. I even like Maxime Bernier. I feel like he did me a dirty. I feel like he fucked me over. He's probably playing the game. He might have a legitimate excuse. I'm going to extend him good faith belief here. Okay. I obviously I'm not going to trust him as far as I can throw him at any point in the future. If he comes to me with some kind of brilliant offer or scheme or whatever, because I've been burnt too many times before by him, and I blame myself mostly for that. But, again, he's a Machiavellian. He's kind of greasy, but he just learned to play the game of politics. So don't hate the player, hate the game. Right. But he's more willing to play the game, it seems. So, but listen, I love this upsurge in freedom. Okay. And it's like, you're almost there. It's like the People's Party is almost there. It's like, 90% towards libertarian. But again, it's like the state is cancer. Okay. And if the liberals are 100% cancer and conservatives are 50% cancer and the PPC is 25% cancer, okay, I'd rather have the conservatives. I'd rather have the PPC. But I can't support any amount of cancer. You understand that? That's why I can't support the PPC. That's why I can't support the conservatives. This is why I rejected Bernier's offer, or invitation to join the Conservative Party when he was part of it and run as a candidate. Yeah, I mean, and this is why I won't join the PPC. Look, there are two reasons to join a political party and be politically active. One is that you want to win and take over the reins of power and pull some legislative levers and make things happen for your team. Okay, that's one way. Now, the other thing is to advance ideas, to get important ideas out there, because the public look at that stage during elections and during election cycles, and they're hungry for a message. And so you stand on that stage and you deliver it. The most important message that can be delivered on that stage is being delivered by the Libertarian Party of Canada. I don't get what the point of the PPC is if I'm just going to deliver a half-assed message that in some ways sows the seeds of statism that are going to be used against me in the future, that are going to support progressive policies in the future. There's no point to it. And there's definitely no point to it if I think that pragmatically I need to get elected and win a seat. Okay. PPC, in order to win a seat, is going to have to truly reflect the people, and the people are absolutely terrible. They're going to have to say the things Pierre Poilievre is saying. They're going to have to disavow that German MP, Christine Anderson, because the public thinks she's a racist Nazi, and therefore you better disavow her if you want to get votes. You understand? You have to sell your soul to get those votes. So if you're going to start to sell your soul, I'm out. But also, if you're not going to sell your soul, then don't even half sell it. Don't even talk about legalizing drugs. Don't even talk about the government doing shit. Just stand up for liberty. Or, I don't know, read some Rothbard, dudes. Read some Rothbard, read some Hans Hermann Hoppe. Understand political philosophy a little bit, right? Understand why the state needs to be restricted. not just because they're of your feelings, but because of moral and ethical truths, because of universal principles that can be applied. All right. Again, guys, hey, I love you all. Look, I'm just glad that so many people are heading in the right direction. And look, the PPC is a much needed voice, maybe in Canadian politics. At least there's a place for people who aren't willing to fully embrace liberty to land. They're like, okay, I'm liberty curious, so I'm going to maybe fool around a little bit with the PPC. Okay, maybe we fully radicalize you and get you fully on board with liberty. So maybe it plays an important role. And certainly having a bunch of people push back against specific policies like the COVID pandemic policies and different things are great. I wish that the pushback would have been based on principle and not based on the idea, that government just didn't work for this pandemic, right? And the vaccine didn't work and blah, blah, blah. No, even if it had worked, even if it had limited the spread, even if it had 100%, it still would have been evil. And you need to understand that the reason why that is. And if you don't, you're not as impactful and as effective as you can and should be. Anyways, I've rambled long enough. You guys get the picture. I'm going to go get some caffeine. Maybe I'll try to find some nicotine so I'm not so on edge and grumpy, but let me know below how I did. Was I too mean? Was I too grumpy? Was I too boisterous and profane? Yeah, I'm sorry if I was, definitely not safe for work, but peace out. Talk to you next time.